Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education regularly scheduled meeting. Are we in compliance with open meeting laws?
Yes, we are.
Okay, will you please call a roll?
Carlin?
Here.
Eliason?
Here.
Evans?
Here.
Garner?
Here.
Herzog?
Here.
Olmsted?
Here.
Peschel?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, and we're going to lead ourselves in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, board and administrative reports. I don't have anything to report, so we'll move right into the superintendent's good news report.
And the superintendent's, it's not that we don't have a lot of good news, but we have an augmented piece of good news from our guests in the audience tonight. But I told them that it could be 5 to 7 minutes. Actually, I think it will be 2. And as the superintendent's good news, it's a quiet time of the year as far as student activities. And with that, I will do that and then call upon our guests to share the good news that they have in the community. First of all, the 7 Waves Robotics students and 2 mentors traveled to China to compete in the 4th annual China Robotics Challenge, which is a 4-day event where students had the opportunity to compete with their robot as well as their mentor pre-rookie teams. While there, the students visited several attractions during their sightseeing tour as well. During this past week, the superintendent has a number of meetings in the superintendent's calendar, and that is also very limited as we really are fully engaged in our administrative training, nearly 3 complete days this week, all in the same activities and on different topical areas. And with that, I have the privilege of turning to our we lost the screen. There we go. There it is. Waiting for it. Come on up and to introduce and recognize outstanding contributions to the community. I was reflecting on the fact that it was kind of a joy. We normally have teachers, administrators, and especially students here, but it's one of those privileged nights that I have my contemporaries in age here at the same time. So it is nice to have all of you here, and many of you I've crossed paths with over the past number of years, and here these wonderful individuals in their church communities are doing wonderful things for children, and they're going to share that information with us tonight.
Thank you very much. My name is Eileen Keel. I live on St. Ives Road in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I'm a representative from our Savior's Lutheran Church and for our Feed the Children program. This is at 1860 Wisconsin Street in Oshkosh. After realizing the need in our community, our church decided to act with other churches in the area and Feed the Children was born. We are serving hot lunches for children up to the age of 18 years old and a take-home lunch bag, which contains about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, juice, fruit, granola bars, etc. The lunch is being served by a group of volunteers from our Saviors and other community members from Monday through Friday. It's from July 31st through September 1st. On the last day, we plan to have maybe some school supplies and underwear and socks. Our church last week served 125 kids, which was, I thought, pretty darn good for our first week in getting out the information. Our funds have been received from our church members, friends, and from a grant at Trivent Insurance Action Team Funds. We are thankful to the Oshkosh Area School District summer school programs for notifying the children and for our feeding station and for handing out our handouts that we did give to them. I guess our goal would be to have a citywide program like this throughout the district with a central person in charge of all of these programs. Again, we thank you and the city. We're wanting any assistance that you are able to give us anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Carol Hillman. I live on Highland Shore Lane in Oshkosh, and I'm a member of Most Blessed Sacrament Parish. We are the Lunch Bags program. In early 2016, the Lift Women's Group of Most Blessed Sacrament Parish answered a call from Christ Lutheran Church to assist with their August lunch program. Because the Oshkosh Area School District does not provide lunch after summer school classes end, Christ Lutheran saw a need in 2014 and sought to help. Over 40 of our parishioners volunteered last August for 7 days to cook, serve, and clean up after a noon lunch. Several days were rather difficult. The weather was typical August. It was over 90, it was muggy, and it's not air conditioned. But we persevered. And every volunteer from last year signed up to help this year. All along, Christ Lutheran's intent was to have more churches or groups become familiar with this project and then initiate their own service. This year, Christ Lutheran was unable to continue their program. Our parish and 2 Lutheran churches, St. Andrew and Our Savior, have stepped in to ensure that the children and their families have a lunch. And Most Blessed Sacrament Lunch Bags program sought to assist the students at Washington and Webster Stanley Elementary and middle schools, because our program is at the St. Mary's site, which is Monroe and Merritt. This year was a learning experience. It's a large task. In the future, it would be prudent to advise the schools prior to the end of the school year so they can alert the students that these programs will be happening in their neighborhoods. And certainly a reminder email or flyer near the end of summer school. Although we've distributed flyers on the east side of town, we called upon neighborhood groups to spread the word, and we've reached out to social services groups in the city. We feel we need a little more assistance from both the school district and the community in getting the word out to those people whom we're trying to reach. We had over 200 volunteers offer to serve, and we had the financial backing from both individuals and groups to make this program work. And we need to make sure that the families who need this program become aware of those opportunities that this community offers prior to the end of the school year next year.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Just go ahead.
My name is Carol Spiegelberg, and I'm a member of St. Andrew's Lutheran Church. I also live on Bowen Street. We started way back last September with Our Saviors when they had contacted us and asked if we would be involved in it. So my pastor, myself, and Mr. Galicia decided to attend over there. We thought it was a need that the kids really, really needed in the city. The problem why we decided not to do it just at Our Saviors was of the location. We realized that we have the roundabout there, Jackson Drive, crossing the streets. And then we realized the neighborhood where our church is located on, by Murdoch there and Hazel and Oak, north of our church, the need of the neighborhood of the children. So we put our feelers together and hated to disappoint Our Saviors. We still wanted to work, and we still work with them closely, but we decided to do it on our own. So our church and our community have been great. We've reached out to lots of businesses, and the businesses have been grateful to us. They have donated money, food. You cannot believe what has come into our food pantry. Our church members, we have raised over $7,000 for this event. You say, that sounds like a lot of money, but when you're starting to feed the children in the community, we realize it's not. Because we also serve, like they do, a hot meal, and we send them home with lunches every single day. So we realize that the need is there for our children. And when we see what's coming through the doors every day now, we think it's a bigger community than just our churches.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would try to reach out with the city and the school district. And we also thank the school district because they did send out messages to all of our students and parents via email. We went door to door, sending out flyers in our neighborhood also, contacting businesses and putting up posters also. And that was a great help to us. We have tons of volunteers that can't wait to see our children being fed. And so we realize that it's a great opportunity for the city of Oshkosh to get involved in.
Thank you.
I
Thank you
would-
for your work.
Mhm.
Very important.
Thank you.
Yeah. I would just express my thanks. I was alerted to the opportunity that Dr. Herzog mentioned, that your churches were working on these activities, and we had received your brochures that we then distributed by way of email as well. But yes, having that information earlier, because families have become used to, and certainly using the food service program that exists, that parallels summer school program that continues through. We have children served through near the end of July, and then with the August program coming into place, your kindness and generosity and all of these churches' sense of social justice is just to be honored and admired, and we are so grateful for the benefits that you're providing for our children who desperately need that supplemental nutrition during the week.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And as we say to all of our guests, you're welcome to stay, but most people do not.
I'm moving that to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to other reports. Are there any committee chairs that have a report
I have
for
one.
tonight?
I have one.
Oh, you do? Okay.
On July 20th, the Facility and Finance Committee met, and the first thing we went over was the budget variance report, which was a written report. There appears to be a $1.5 million surplus that was discussed later in the meeting under the fiscal year for 2016-17. So I'll talk about that at the end here. We had Julie Conrad talk to us about the revised CLC funding plan due to the DPI grant reduction. She reported to the committee that Emmeline Cook, Smith, and Jefferson all lost the 2017-18 CLC funding due to lack of funding. Smith and Jefferson will stay licensed after school care. E. Cook is a current CLC site and has been for 5 years, so we reviewed 3 different options to revise for that. Option A was to maintain a full CLC lighted schoolhouse programming and staffing for an additional $130,000. Option B was to return E. Cook to the YMCA Aftercare, which is a licensed daycare site with a maximum of only 45 students. This option would cost families $1,872,000 per year to use. It was noted that the YMCA would not have time to obtain necessary licensing, and this option would drastically reduce the number of students served at the high poverty school by at least more than half. This would cause hardship, obviously, to E. Cook. So option C was to maintain the CLC lighted schoolhouse by adding an additional $80,000 to Fund 80. This option would allow the site to continue to serve 100 students, and cost to the families would increase to $250 per year. The CLC outreach coordinator would go unfulfilled. The YMCA and the Oshkosh Area School District would jointly pursue grant funding sources to keep that going. The committee supported option C, however, cautioned the continued use of Fund 80 for additional programming. It was also noted that no one would be turned away for the inability to pay. So if any family couldn't, we would work with them. The school board, or this will come to the board as part of our new budget. So the fiscal year 2016-17, Mrs. Schnorr addressed the amended budget variance report. There is a $1.5 million estimated surplus. However, part of that was the high school's tracks. The project was estimated to be $1 million, and it's half done. The project will be rebudgeted again for 2017-18 for the remaining cost, which is about $400,000 left. It was the committee's recommendation to put the surplus back into the fund balance. The updated on the state budget, no decisions yet have been made regarding schools. Yesterday's update, now this was back July 20th. Yesterday's update had to do with vouchers, raising the income level and still being eligible for vouchers. There was also discussion about eliminating the rule that if a child is already in private school, they would not be eligible. So future agenda items is best day sailing and a budget update. So our next meeting is September 21st at 8:30 a.m.
Thank you.
That's all.
Okay, any other committee chairs have reports? Okay, we have two written reports, one, excuse me, for Neola expenses, and the other is for the at-risk report from Matt Kemmer. So we'll go right into workshops. Number 1, property condition assessment, Fox and Bray Architects.
Do you want to do the intro, or you just want us to jump right in? Thank you very much. Last fall, the school board authorized a facility condition assessment to be performed. We wrote an RFP, and Bray Architectural was selected from that RFP process to be the architectural firm to conduct that study. Tonight, we have Matt Wolfert and Tyler Kelly with us to provide that presentation. They are here tonight to provide an overview of the facility's condition assessment. A hard copy of that report will be kept here at Central Administration in case anybody from the public does want to view that. However, there is an electronic copy on our OASD website that can be viewed online by clicking the facility study link on our OASD homepage. And with that,
Great. Thank you, Jim. Good to be back in Oshkosh. Many familiar faces. Excited to be here again this evening. So as Jim said, we're going to read this entire document together this evening. So I'm glad you've started early. Thank you again for the opportunity. This is the study document, and this doesn't even include the budget component. And so obviously there's been an extensive effort done. Jim and his team have been extremely supportive through this entire process. As you can imagine, when something as comprehensive of this has not been undertaken before, and you've got buildings that date decades and decades with multiple additions and renovations, there's a lot of time and effort and a lot of just simple exploration that has to be done to determine and prepare a report that is comprehensive in nature. So we hope that you find the study document to be valuable moving forward. And so we'll give you a brief overview. Again, Tyler Kelly's here this evening. Tyler, along with a couple of other team members, spent a great deal of time in district with engineers and others working on this. So I'll give you the overview. Again, the study process really was, we were asked to look at a number of things: architectural and site, the engineering side, so plumbing, HVAC, electrical systems, ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act, revisiting. This was a study that was done about 10 years ago now, probably, going back and looking at that, seeing which areas improvements have been made, what other needs are still necessary there. And then we also met with the maintenance and custodial team to get some feedback from them and find out where they saw needs. And that was critical because what we don't do with these studies is these aren't destructive analysis where we're taking walls down or digging up pipes or sending cameras through lines. So we really do, we rely on observations and engineer analysis of systems. We don't have the ability, obviously, to live in these buildings every day. We're not looking behind walls. And so that's the information that's critically important from Jim and his team to understand where they're seeing regular challenges that just wouldn't be able to be observed through this type of an analysis. So that's another important layer of information that has been added to this document. So what do these different pieces look at? The architectural and site analysis is really looking at the building as a whole and the site to determine and observe any areas that we would consider to be of need. This looks at the exterior building envelope, so it would be roofs, which you have a good grasp on, fortunately. You have a good study document previously that we've used for this. Exterior envelope being windows and doors, so we looked at that component. And then also looking at general condition of existing corridors, flooring, walls, etc. That is not a comprehensive piece. As you can imagine, that really does, if you elect to proceed with projects, that component really should and does require a lot of detailed effort because we don't look at every square foot of floor, and there's really no value in doing that. That's something that you're going to tackle as you move along, as you begin implementing. The engineering piece is critically important. Plumbing, HVAC, and electrical team members have walked and toured each of the schools and have provided full written reports. There's a summary version which we'll share with you this evening. ADA, as I said earlier, really looking at how do your buildings comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then the maintenance and custodial feedback piece. So that was the final component, which was added within the last month or so. I won't touch on these here because we're going to give you a case study, and I believe you had this from last week. So we're going to look at Smith Elementary just to give you a sense of what this entire document, each chapter looks like. But this is a simple description, which is hopefully beneficial of what each of the different components aim to look at. It's also, I think, important to determine what isn't here, because the natural reaction, and I'll admit architecturally we jump to now how do we solve these issues, what do we do? What's not here, and which wasn't part of it, and it's okay, is the other lens of how are these facilities supporting our students educationally? Or do we have the sufficient capacity to support the quantity of students there? Those are the types of things that aren't evaluated at this point. But usually, if you would elect to proceed with kind of the next steps, and we'll talk about that at the end, that's the other lens that I think we would want to eventually look at the schools through is, obviously this is important, and this is a lot of heavy lifting to get through this. What do we need just to take care of the buildings as we have them so they don't fall down around us, and we've got plumbing, HVAC, and electrical systems that work. That's what's here this evening. How are the spaces supporting students and education is not here, but would be a component you may want to consider moving forward. So as I said, we'll look at Smith, and just to give you a sense of what's in here. And we grabbed Smith, honestly, because it's a relatively easy one. If you grab West, you probably won't see it as quite as easy. There's obviously a much bigger building, and there's a lot of need when you look at that school specifically. So the first thing we do in each of these sections is really just give a basic overview of the school itself. What size is it? How many students is it serving in the last year? How many acres is the site? And I found it interesting when you look at the full study document, you have over about 230 acres of property across the district. If you correlated that to the quantity of square feet, and we don't have that handy, you have millions of square feet of buildings as well. You generally, and this is typical of a district of this size and this age in terms of when these buildings were built, you actually have some smaller sites with a lot of students going to school on them. That's not a bad thing, it's just the reality of a district of this size. But each of these looks at then how do we service the buildings in terms of parking. In this case, we don't. And then with buses, obviously, how are we servicing it, if at all? How many buses are we bringing to the site? How are those handled? And so this, again, is a very quick overview, not a significant piece, but just to get a sense, if you aren't familiar with the schools, you could get a quick sense at the beginning of each section on how each school serves the district. Little description of when different buildings, give you a little sense of flavor of how the interior finishes are with some photos. And then the building evolution. This is, quite frankly, almost the most interesting piece. A lot of people love looking at these. They're like, I had no idea West was, I'll exaggerate, 38 additions over 50 years. You know, people just don't realize it. And when you see it graphically, it's really kind of an interesting way to look at the age and the vintage and the nature of some of your buildings. And so Smith is really pretty straightforward, right? 3 sections, 1 small stair, which nobody's really sure when it was added. And that's the other thing we also find is there's a lot of times we get on site and there's just no plans for them, so we don't really have a sense of when they were added. And what we'll often find, and you guys will probably find this if anybody ever takes the time to really go through this, you'll have some local historians or neighbors who will say, I remember when that stair was built, I lived across the street. That's actually, quite frankly, good information to add here. We don't have it verified, but it's a great thing to add to this as we move forward so we get some of that information. But as you can see, pretty straightforward, 4 different, really 3 major sections plus a small stair addition. And if you dig through this, you'll see some buildings are pretty interesting as to how many different projects it has taken to get to their current state. Looking at sites, I don't know how we did this before, aerial photography and imagery, but it's a much better way to explain and share visually a type of site, the nature of the site. You can even start to see some, and as we get to the site study, you'll see kind of some of the deterioration is visible from an aerial when it comes to playgrounds and things like that as you get into these. But again, just setting context and having that information on site for people to review. Existing building plans, so these 3 floors here, lower, first and second floor, these are field verified. So our team went every building, every site, and toured and field verified the existing conditions. So that's another big undertaking, and hopefully it's a valuable piece of information you have moving forward. I will say that we would encourage, if you do make changes over time, to try to keep up on this versus having to catch up on this. It's far more cost effective, and this was not an inexpensive investment you made. is to keep up on this on a regular basis versus having to start over and do a lot of that work. So it's kind of a side note. I'm not trying to make more work for us, but maintaining these is easier than creating them. But again, these existing plans really should be valuable. We actually have accurate existing floor plans for each of the buildings in the district now moving forward. We then get into the really exciting stuff for an architect, engineer reports. This is where we've taken the plumbing, HVAC, and electrical reports, and they're lengthier. They wrote existing conditions, recommendations. What we really did here is try to summarize, just so that we're not going too far into detail. That detail is absolutely available. It's not as though we're hiding it. But we tried to be succinct, if you can call this document succinct, with that information by school. So really we're picking out the highlights here at a high level. What are the needs associated with the plumbing, HVAC, and electrical systems at each building? So you can see even kind of a summarized version gets to be a bit lengthy in bullet point form. We then move to the architectural needs assessment side. So we're looking at the infrastructure, maintenance, building envelope. How is the building holding up from the perspective of floors, walls, doors, et cetera, just to get a sense of where the building sits. Each of these plans then actually correlate back to the need as described earlier. So for example, 1B at the top is really identifying where the wall plaster issue is occurring that we observed on our walkthrough. And that obviously carries itself throughout this document, multiple floors. We then get to the site. So this was an effort undertaken by a Point of Beginning, a civil engineering firm that specializes and does a lot of school work. And so they really went through and identified areas. These areas correlate on the site plan, as you can see here, back to a description of the condition that those surfaces are in. So hopefully this will become a guide moving forward for some potential improvements when funding is available for them at a site level at each school. But again, the written word's great. Quite frankly, the graphics are often where people focus, just a little easier to understand and to get a sense of. Then we get into the ADA. So in this case, there's a couple pages just defining the areas that, not specific to the building, but specific to ADA code. What were we looking at from the perspective of door pulls, door hardware, bathroom accessibility, all the different components. And ADA, quite frankly, is a pretty exhaustive component of any of these studies. So this is consistent as we move through each of the sections. It's the same set of standards that we use to evaluate each school. So you can see here there's 1 through 9 different sections that we looked at. And then when you get to the plans, we're calling attention to where those challenges occur at each school, correlating back to that standard set of guidelines for ADA that we used for each building. So this, you can tell, and it's probably not a big surprise if you've been in the school, that there's a fair amount of ADA needs here at this building. We repeat that so that it's easier to correlate when you're looking at this. So we look at roofs, and again, the district has a good grasp on roofs. You've got a consultant that keeps this information for us. What we try to do here is, again, make it more graphic, 1 page, get an understanding of when was the roof installed, if it's known, what type of roof is it, and roughly how much warranty, if we know that information in one place. So a user, a citizen, a taxpayer, if they're interested, they can consume, hopefully, glean a lot of information regarding the roof condition on a school-by-school basis by looking at 1 image. Nothing against the detailed report. Roofing consultants do it. It's a great thing. It's just more than most people want to consume when they're trying to just get a flavor for the condition of roofs at a building or across the district. The final piece within the evaluation is doors and windows. And so, did we do windows here? We did, right? Yeah, just doors in this case. Windows will be in another component. So what we did here is created a rating or a grading system of poor, fair, and good. That's obviously arbitrary, right? I mean, everybody would have a different definition of what a good door is, a poor door is, but we've tried to define roughly how we graded these. You may have a different opinion when you get out and look at them, but you have a lot of doors in the district, as you can imagine. And they're not inexpensive, and it's probably an area of need at different varying degrees of intensity across the district. Other than hopefully, I think Oak Lawn's in good shape. We can say that confidently. But this is a good thing to look at again. These are things that are necessary every day. It's a layer of security at each of your schools. If doors aren't closing and sealing correctly, it's not only an energy efficiency issue, but a potential point of access. So it is an important area to consider as we look at buildings. But as you can see here, we've tried to define different conditions, just graphically again. Give somebody a photo of what a door looks like in good condition, fair condition, poor condition, so they can make some judgment of their own if they agree or not. But then we obviously identify on a plan around the perimeter where each of those doors are. So I will say, the one thing that isn't done at this point, and it's in process, is the cost. That's what everybody's gonna say, is how much is all this stuff gonna cost to repair? We're working on it. We have all of the information back from the engineers as of now. We're gonna add the architectural component to that in the coming weeks, and then again, if you want us to come back, summarize that in a written report, whatever you'd like, we'd be happy to share that. We do intentionally separate it from the study document itself, because this study document, I think, has a much longer life than a budget does. A budget every year becomes obviously your ability to spend those dollars, and the budgets aren't really accurate beyond the projection or the date in which we do them. So we do intentionally separate those from this, because in 7, 8, 9 years, you don't have to reprint or republish this study document. You can republish and update the budget as needed. But that's in process, and it is, I think, one of the final pieces we need to do to complete the facility condition assessment. So with that, and then I'll kind of end on this slide. Any questions, thoughts, areas that you feel need more definition? Anything we could do in addition to what we've provided today to assist the district moving forward on the condition assessment side of things?
I have a few questions. The first one, Jim, if you would help me remember, the end game, the purpose of this study was to...
Correct. Great question. So the purpose of the study really is a big step in what is a journey,
Yep.
what will become a journey for this school district in developing a 20, 30, 40-year plan. Where are we truly growing? Where are we going to go? You know, how is the district growing? What are we going to do with our buildings as they age? There are so many questions out there. Do we renovate? Do we not renovate? Do we add on? Do we not? Do we build a new building somewhere else, somewhere in the future? Do we not? So it was our opinion at that point that we really can't answer those questions without first thoroughly understanding what do we have now.
Okay.
And it's interesting, and I think Matt nailed it right on the head when he began his presentation, is that what you won't see in this study is a conclusion, intentionally so.
Right.
We're not trying to solve any problems with this particular study. We're taking a photograph, a narrative of exactly where we are today. And in our subsequent studies or conversations within our groups, and I think we do need to meet with another group, and we need to define what those meetings are going to look like and how we're going to move forward. But this is a fantastic document to which, while we grow and while we come across more questions, well, should we do this? Let's look back at this particular building. Well, this building doesn't support what you want to do potentially.
Okay.
So we don't have to worry about trying to hire somebody to answer that question. We have that information already.
Awesome. Then my second question is, now that you have this document and you're already very well aware of all of our facilities, do you have any conclusions at this point that you would be brave enough to share? Does that put you on the spot? I didn't even tell you I was going to do that to you.
The study doesn't really support formal conclusions
Right.
at this time.
How about this? Are there any surprises?
No, we helped write the report in the sense that our team, to a certain extent, I walked many of the buildings with Bray. We provided some supplemental data to areas to which they could not access. You know, we knew of failures that were occurring in the tunnels and within the walls, things that could only be found through destructive analysis. So those things continue to show up on a weekly basis for us in our department. But just when we think we've seen it all, something new will show itself to us, and that's how we find these problems. So to that point, no, nothing here was overly shocking or startling to us. I'm quite certain there are things that we know about that did not make their way into this report, because it would really create a quite cumbersome report, and it would become highly detailed, which is what we were trying to avoid. We wanted to create a high-level
Foundation.
report. We wanted to be accurate, but not overwhelmingly so. I think if we get to a point, or when we get to a point further down the road where we really start to drill down and start to evaluate potential facilities, and we have deeper questions, then I think we can start to reveal some more of that data, and if we don't know, we can really start to drill down and find more information
Okay.
on the infrastructure of the plumbing, which concerns me on a lot of our sites, or the electrical, which
Mhm.
concerns me, the water systems, which concern me, because everything is period and you can't get to them in a
Mhm.
lot of our facilities. They're buried in 18 inches of masonry. So those things are glaring to me,
Mhm.
likely not for a regular person just touring our facilities.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks.
And part of what I think needs to be emphasized is that the caution that was introduced early on is educational programming, decision-making. For example, Jim and I, 2 years ago, were a high school principal at West, sat down with us with department representatives and talked about the lack of adequacy in space for, and the adequacy of science labs. We know that at both high schools, that's not West, but it's that we're dealing with mid-century, mid-20th century products there in the 21st century with those facilities. We're dealing with, because of growth in programming, inadequacy of enough space for music and all the auxiliary things that are provided in music today that go beyond just choir, band, and orchestra. All of those are pieces. But in every single area, we could identify that what we presently offer in physical facilities is by no means state-of-the-art, with the exception of 1 or 2 buildings with recent improvements to them. And that's really the extent of it. We know the rest are inadequate functioning. They're safe. They're sound buildings. But as Jim's crew and my discussions with our maintenance crew regularly, there always is what's the next thing crumbling that's buried in 18 inches of concrete. And that's really the issue. It's not unlike some of the nightmares that the city of Oshkosh goes through with replacing sewers and water services across. These buildings were built in the same vintage, and they no longer, things don't last forever, and that's really the struggle that we face. But it is the ultimate of a solid foundation to assess and to get us on a standard plane with every facility that hadn't existed in the district, because things have been done in a piecemeal manner, and they've also been, as this board knows, I mean, you have invested in the past 5.5, 6 years. We've put more than $50 million into taking care of the facilities and playing catch-up. But it's only a part of the problem, and for the vast majority of it has been investments that have been authorized by special legislation that allows for us to be able to finance it. We have not gone for a bond issue, with the exception of Oaklawn, and using other available funds for the building addition and effectively bringing Lakeside up to date. And beyond that, we've lived with only the funding that has been available through as being referred to in the newspapers these days as green investments, right? And that's really what our party to that.
And I think the study does reflect those investments from the perspective of HVAC. I traditionally would have seen in a district with buildings of this age being, there's still need, don't get me wrong, but it would have been a much bigger need across the district if you hadn't made those investments. And I think Jim hit it on the head. It's surprising. I think the only thing that was really surprising was the electrical infrastructure. Plumbing infrastructure is traditionally hard because it's hard to get to most of those sanitary lines to ever do anything with them. So it is a bit of an exercise of putting out the fires as they start from a plumbing perspective, because you just don't know it's an issue till it becomes one. Electrically, I think you're going to see some pretty significant need when we get through the budget side of this that will need to be addressed for these buildings to remain online for decades to come.
And what we have to bear in mind with each of those, as we look at then the pricing that relates to those, is it the wisdom to invest in that, or to look at replacement facilities.
Yeah.
To what extent do we continue to put money into a building that has these other list of inadequacies and to hold it together? Remember that in the course we are now approaching, and I haven't rerun the calculation, we're just under 80 years average age of buildings in the district. We must be, and you do a lot of Wisconsin work, we must be on a collection of buildings that must be on average among the oldest in the state.
Yep.
And that puts us, and that includes a building that's in its, going into its 5th year of operation, and that being Oaklawn.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, and I think if you looked at it from that perspective, with the last major investment and support from the community through a bond issue, I think there'd even be a bigger gap there, which probably suggests your facilities are different. Sheboygan's aging similarly, similar sized district, but they've had multiple major investments even in the last 20 years, and they're in the middle of a current $30 million upgrade package across the district. And so that doesn't mean it's no indictment of anything. It's the reality of the situation. I think the should be complimented for taking the first proactive step, which is to understand what we have. This traditionally, and again, I'm not recommending this, and we'd have to have a lot of discussions about where you wanted to head, but this traditionally leads to a discussion about shouldn't we have a master plan, district-wide, saying how are we doing from a capacity perspective? Are buildings underpopulated, overpopulated? How do we best support our students? How do we address some of the educational needs in the areas that Stan mentioned? And I'm guessing there are others if we would get into that discussion. And the big benefit, I think, of a master plan is it allows you to be the best steward of taxpayer dollars, because if the master plan suggests that in 10 years, hopefully, assuming all things work out financially, building X will not be part of our inventory anymore, that's a great indication for Jim and the team. Let's Band-Aid building X. If building Y it's here forever, that's a great situation. When they do have a need arise, let's put a long-term fix on that. Right now, without that master plan, I think it's very difficult. I mean, you're doing the best you can, and that's, again, this is a very common challenge. Schools, you have the same school funding challenge that every district has had throughout the state. And so the best thing to do is look at this as being proactive, look at it as an opportunity to begin moving forward. West Bend's a great example. They were a district that had very little, if any, community support for school facility investment as of 20 years ago. They established a 25-year facility master plan starting with something similar, and they've implemented the first 2 phases. Their middle schools are now addressed. They're now looking at what to do with one of their most aging elementary schools and their high school or schools. I'm still not sure what I'm supposed to call that unique model down there. East and West in one building. But I think it's a good example when you look around. Other people have been through this and kind of tackling it with the lens of being proactive, having a master plan that doesn't just look at condition, but educational opportunity is usually the best next step.
And what the Board of Education and this administration needs to constantly bear in mind that we are trying to maintain that balance between tax impact for operational dollars versus capital investment. And as we've edged our way through that process, we're hopeful that some future improvement may come out of state legislation that would allow for some catch-up on the operational side for this district to compete with its sister districts around the state, and thus allowing the focus to be on what do we do with our aging facilities, which is really a major issue that we face. I have said and shared with the board at varying times. I've had parents who are present parents in the district who will say, well, the education is great, but why should my child be attending, or why should my children be attending these facilities when we have neighboring school districts with newer or new facilities that would be a whole lot more attractive to attend? Well, the reality is it's the content that's most important. Life in a school is limited to the number of years that the process is there, but it is not something we can ignore. And that to me is the real nightmare. And I think the excitement about the future and knowing starting a solid foundation and having gone through this type of process before, I know how important it is then to develop a comprehensive facilities plan. And the further complication we have in the school community is that in most, for adequacy of, we're programming for schools, we are kind of landlocked. With the exception of one piece of property that hasn't been used and hasn't sold, we don't have adequate property unless we decentralize our school system and certainly deal with undeveloped property on the edge of the school community. Having had the privilege of serving on the on the city's comprehensive plan committee, I see the limitations that exist both structurally as well as emotionally about moving away from what is our present set of school sites, and suddenly having to create alternatives, and then also selling the community on the fact that buildings that they attended, their parents attended, and in some cases their grandparents attended, are, quote, no longer adequate. That's an emotional issue. It is not a factual issue, but it is emotion, and that's the nightmare that we face.
I want to thank you for including the custodial and maintenance crews. Those are the people who are there day in and day out, 12 months of the year. They know what works and what doesn't work and what they have to maybe jury rig or patch together to make it work, and they do a phenomenal job, in my opinion, of keeping those buildings clean and functioning and safe for students and staff, given the resources that they've been given over time. So I just want to say kudos to Jim and to the custodial and maintenance crews of the district for the good work they do with the limited resources we sometimes provide them to improve our buildings. So thank you.
I mean this in a good way. The maintenance staff, they had vocal opinions, and they were very willing to share them. And I mean that in a good way. I mean they had some strong opinions on which buildings have a life that they could see in the future, and there's others that they say unless you live day to day like we do between the walls and in the tunnels, it's really hard to get a grasp of how challenging the situation is. And again, they do everything behind the walls and in the tunnels to keep it going, so people don't know that the issues are there. But they're a great resource and a critical one as options are explored in the future of what to do.
Are there any other questions, comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I hope
Thank
you
you
don't
for your
have to
continued
carry
partnership.
that anywhere else.
Great
You get
to see
leave it
many of
here.
you again.
Yeah, thanks.
This one stays here, right? I
This
think.
one stays here?
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks
And
again.
you understand that with our always conservatism about consuming paper, when I heard the 750-plus pages, all I could think of was 2.5 reams of paper. And that's why we don't mass produce those.
Absolutely.
We don't each get a copy?
You feel if you're bored
You brought
sometime.
one.
Board members may request, and we will provide.
Absolutely.
I'm
Thanks
good.
again. Have a good rest of the night. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Okay, next workshop is strategic plan update by the executive team.
First time with the new mics. They're a little scary. It's okay. All right.
And we trust we have a green dot on there. So
I know.
Julie is working.
That's how we know we're on. This is great. So we're here to provide a strategic plan update that was requested, and some of this is going to look really familiar. Some of it is going to be somewhat new based upon the meeting we had last spring, where the board kind of approved a series of extra metrics, and Julie will have some great things to share on that front as well. So we're gonna go through sort of a 5-part piece here. I'll talk a little bit about the overview and alignment of the community process. You all know that in spades, but I'm not sure everybody watching on TV would necessarily know that. And that's an important ingredient to the success of this plan. And make no doubts about it, we've been very successful in the previous strategic plan. We're even more successful with this strategic plan. So I think that's part of the reason why. I'll talk a little bit about the plan process, management, and the transparency, and how we come up with some of the numbers and how those are all calculated. I'll talk about the plan completion measures and graphics. Some of those are brand new. They've been generated in a new system. And then I'll hand it over to Julie, who will talk a lot about the assessment metrics, our new OASD dashboard, et cetera. And then Q&A time for you, and then we have the entire exec team here to help out, because all of us have different components of the plan. So, as you know, our tagline is building community through education, and it is way more than a tagline here, because the community is the one that helped us generate the strategic plan. The guts of the strategic plan, the meat of it, were all put together from a countless number of community meetings. That was eventually processed and handed to you as a school board. You took those recommendations and you charged the administration with creating a strategic plan on how we are going to do that. Strategic plans are about resource allocation. What do we, those of us behind me here, and what do the administrators and what do the teachers spend their time, energy, and resources on? That's what the strategic plan helps us with and keeps us focused. And then, of course, we do periodic updates at least twice a year. This happens to be one of them, but we also do public updates for O4E and some of the other organizations. So, pretty excited about that. These are our 5 priorities for those who may have forgotten. Priority 1 is improve student learning for all. Priority 2, improve district communications. Priority 3, develop and invest in quality staff. Priority 4, maintain and improve facilities. And Priority 5, strengthen partnerships and community engagement. Very nice overview summary, but we also have that foundational goal of securing sustainable funding. So that is, really we have 6 main priorities. The 6th one, though, flows throughout all the previous 5. So the plan duration, it started in 2016-17. It goes through 2018-19. We tended to front load a lot of this, and you'll hear me talk about that near the end in some of the conclusions. But we prioritize our work based upon the plan. Revisions are made weekly, because we do this every time we have an executive committee meeting, which is every Monday. And then we update it, and it's immediately updated on the website. Here's the completion sort of data that we use. So if something has not been initiated, we give it a score of 0. If something has been initiated, in other words, we've started conversations, we may have had some pre-meetings, we may have set some agendas, we give it about a 10% completion rate. If the task is half complete, 50%, 3/4 complete, 75%, and then either sustained or fully completed, it'll be 90 or 100%. Those are the only numbers we use. We don't try to say, oh, this is actually, I'm feeling this is a 60% today. We figured that was way too arbitrary. So these are the numbers that we use. And the beauty of the system that we have is it also calculates in a weighted number based upon the length of the task. If it is something that is geared to take 2 years to complete, and it is complete, it's going to get more power than something that's only going to take us 2 weeks. Okay, so the system looks like this. It's color-coded, it has the different priorities that are up there, and if you zoom in on it, you'll see that there's a variety of goals, action steps, tasks. And how it works is it averages, as you can see in the box in red, it averages all those together and then weights them according to their duration, and then that gives you sort of a summary total. So when we generate these, it isn't just a arbitrary 78%. This is done by using those previous metrics. So it's pretty solid. So in the first one, improving student learning for all, you can see that these various goals have been met to these levels. I would encourage anybody who's really interested in what ensure fairness and equity of instructional resources across the district means to actually go to the strategic plan on our website, because there's a great deal of detailed information there that leads us to that 57% completion. But just to show you how this looks, as of August of 2017, we are 47% of the way through ensuring teachers and curriculum can support a personalized learning environment. We're 57% in ensuring fairness and equity of instructional resources. 66% in strengthening academic and behavioral supports. You can see we're at 0% in creating programs of choice. Part of that is because it's not slated to begin till a little bit later in the plan. Part of it is the other items are being put in place prior to this. And then developing multiple methods to evaluate student data, 41%, for a priority 1 completion rate of 44%. Now this is the part that, as I'm going through this, that you'll recognize this is very similar to what we've done in the past. And as we go through the plan, you're going to see additional columns put in here to show the changes in the progress. So priority 2, improve district communications. 2A was allocate resources for district communications and marketing. That is complete. Understand needs, preferences, and perceptions of key stakeholders. That has also been completed, and all the sub-components underneath that. Developing our brand, communication, and marketing plan, that's at 27%, mainly because we're in the process of hiring the communications director who will lead part of that process. And goal 2D, improve district communication delivery channels, that's 55%. So priority 2 completion averages out at 55%. Priority 3, developing and investing in quality staff. That has 3 goals to it. A is ensure and support quality work performance. We're about 65% of the way through our items on that one. Support work-life balance for staff through wellness. We're at about 57%, taking some good strides there. Examining the effectiveness of the staff evaluation process. We have completed that, and we have gone beyond the introduction to educator effectiveness to actually moving through the process, and we're moving into the second year, which is an advantage. So our priority 3 completion is at 74%. Priority 4, 4A, annually update the 10-year facility plan and communicate with stakeholders. That's 92%. Some of that was actually the previous workshop tonight. 4B, establish and implement consistent standards for safety and securities, 56%. 4C, conduct a facility capacity study and audit, that's 14%, because we know there's more to that. 4D, continue to seek a means to become more energy efficient, that's 33%, for a priority 4 completion of 51%. Priority 5, strengthening partnerships and community engagement. That has 3 core goals: enhancing partnerships to prepare students to be college, career, community ready, 38%. Expand and strengthen school community partnerships. That's about 3% right now. I haven't started that one much. Goal 5C, strengthen the district partnership with O4E. That's at about 19%, for priority 5 of about 22%. Most of that one actually has work being slated for the 3rd year of the plan. The foundational goal, 6A, educate the public on state and resulting district fiscal situation. We're about 1/4 of the way through our action steps there. 6B, develop a referendum plan to sustain programs and facilities. This was related to the 2016 referendum, and that has obviously been complete. 6C, strengthen Oshkosh Area School District Education Foundation. That's about 38% complete. And 6D, seek alternative non-traditional means of enhancing revenue. That's about 10%. So the goal is at about 31%. So I just did in the past 6 slides what I strongly encourage and criticize anybody for doing, and that is reading PowerPoints. So we're going to get to something a little bit, has a little bit more meat to it in terms of graphs and charts. But all told, there's 5 priorities, there's 23 goals, and there's 88 action steps. Most people who would analyze a strategic plan would tell you you're asking too much. You're biting off a way big chunk. We've had great success with this, and I think we did the same thing in the previous strategic plan, and some of those things carried over to this plan. But there's no harm necessarily in doing that, because we prioritize those items that have to come first, second, third. So the ones that we may not get to are usually ones that are a little bit lower in the priority chain, or require something to be done prior to us looking at it. So here's the new plan report measures, which is just really a different way of looking at what I just shared with you. And these were generated by one of the spreadsheets that Walter Jankowski shared with us. And what we did is we basically take the data from our strategic planning system, and we take that raw data, drop it in, and it runs these calculations for us. So this is a chart that shows the status of goals, action steps, and tasks. And you can see that the completed is in the green, the in progress at 50.3% is in yellow, and not started is 8.2%. So actually I'm feeling pretty good about that one. We've completed quite a bit, but if you add the two together, over close to 93% has some sort of activity on it. And we are at the beginning, at the very start of year 2 of the 3-year plan. This graph is interesting, but not super informative. It just tells you quantities. The short blue is are the action steps that are related to each of the priorities. I'm sorry, the short blue is the goals, the number of goals. The light blue is the action steps. So obviously there's more action steps than there are goals. This one here talks about the same thing, and I know the writing is really small on the bottom, but those are the 5 priority, or 6 priorities in order, and the blue bar graph shows the quantity of goals, action steps, tasks, and subtasks. So all the transactional quantity. The red shows how far we are moving through those. So you can see that especially for priority 2, even though we have the most specific steps, we've also achieved where that's sort of second highest in terms of our completion. So we've been making good progress there. This does the exact same thing, but it lays out all the different goals. And you can see how many tasks and subtasks there are under each one, and then the red line shows how we're doing, and it's kind of, spikes and valleys. Most of that is because of the way we scheduled it out, and that's something that's always the most difficult, is saying when are we going to accomplish a given task. This one is due date status by priority. This is kind of nice. This shows the green means they're on track, yellow is at potential risk, red means they're 90 days out of whack. So it's been 90 days since we said we would complete them, and we have not completed them yet. So we do have very small pieces that are a little bit out of compliance with that. Sometimes it's because we say we're going to do A, B, and C, but we really only have time to do A and B, and we're going to have to push C off till the next cycle. So that's where a lot of that will come in. This one is due date by status lead. Each one of us on the exec team is sort of handed some of these, and usually they may either directly relate to what we do, or they sort of kind of relate to what we do, or you just simply drew the short straw and you're getting this one. So everybody ends up with some of these. You can see that this is somewhat helpful. It does show some data about as far as who has quantity. We probably need to do a little better job of load balancing on some of these, but it also shows us that in some cases, depending upon the tasks of the given year 3-year plan, certain people may end up with more of them. If we're focusing more on curricular objectives, it's probably going to end up, Julie's going to have a much higher bar chart than somebody else might have in that one, so that's part of it. This is another one that shows the same data in a different way. It shows quantity assigned to a given person or persons, and then how we relate in terms of percent completion. But what's interesting is you can see, on the far left, you can see this is in case Linda was assigned 2 tasks, but she's completed them both, so she's doing great. So that worked great. But this also is just sort of a way of us looking at how are we doing. You can see on the far right, there's a series of tasks that are pretty low. Well, part of those are slated for year 3, and we haven't really gotten to some of those yet. Some of them are longer, like for example, what are we going to do now that we have the facility study? Well, we couldn't very well move on that until A, the study was done, and B, now we have a whole bunch of other discussions we should have in relation to that. So that's part of this. So key takeaways from all of that, and we will share this information out there. This will be part of I want to blow those charts out a little bit bigger. I'd like their colors to be a little bit more contrasting before we go ahead and publish them, but it's going to be the same data. Key takeaways so far in terms of strategic plan progress, we are making much faster progress in strategic plan 2.0 than we did in 1.0. We've learned from this. Past board support has allowed for this progress. A lot of the things you're going to see in Julie's section are directly related to board action that you took. For example, when we went ahead and created sort of a data team inside the Oshkosh Area School District, some of you may remember, we had a litany of principals coming up here and saying, if only I could get this data, if only I could, kind of, and then I had to come up at the end and saying, well, we have a plan for that, but we're not there yet. The beauty is, we're now there, okay, and you're going to see some of that. But had we not approved a database engineer, of which other districts have many, and we have one, which is fine, we had none at that point in time. Had we not made those improvements to our data systems, we wouldn't be able to do what you're going to hear about next. And so sometimes it's hard for you as board members to see the connection between what you're doing in those chairs and what you're seeing in these chairs. What I'm trying to say from our strategic plan is we couldn't do any of this without the previous approvals and the support that we receive from you and the Oshkosh community. So that's key to this. Board governance facilitates and focuses our efforts a lot. The support of the strategic plan, the fact that you look at the I've heard several of you say, when a new initiative comes in, is it on our plan or not? That is music to our ears, because that means you're focusing on that with us, and that's very helpful. The board committee process, I think, assists with this a lot. It keeps us all working. The focus of the board on policy and the focus of the administration on operations is a very successful formula. So, a little piece of improvement, and this is really aimed at us as administration, you'll get the benefit of this, is when we do move into Strategic Plan 3.0 in year 2019 to 2022, we need to do a better job of pacing, because we're throwing everything into year 1 and 2, and often the stuff just falls into year 3. I'd rather us be more intentional about that, and we've talked about that before, and that's pretty common. So, with that, I'll turn it over to Julie, who can talk about achievement metrics and dashboards.
So if you remember back to about this time last year, we started talking about what do metrics look like that measure the priority areas. Besides just completion tasks, we want to know how are we doing in moving the needle. And so we went through a process this time last year to put together a dashboard or a scorecard that we would be monitoring when it came to the strategic plan. And at that time, we introduced you to levels of metrics. And so remember, the first level of metrics was overall progress and completion. And that's exactly what Dave went through and said, here's where we are with completing all of these tasks. What I'm going to talk about is going down into levels 2, 3, 4, and 5. And remember, level 2 is the high-level district measured results that you helped us put together when we created the scorecard that went with each of the priority areas, and you did that last July. And then in level 3 is the detailed district measured results by cohort, when you see those more detailed information that I provide when we have done the last 5 years, those accountability or assessment reports. Then we start to move down into 4, 5, and 6. And the reason this is blue is because this is where it belongs, down in the schools, down working with the principals and the classroom teachers, and then all the way down to the individual student data. So we've been working very hard, and actually just this past week on Monday and into Tuesday, we've been working on looking at data and moving past analysis interpretation, because we can now, and moving into effective data work that helps us inform decisions. Because we've been doing these things in the past. We've been doing this at the board level and also at our administrative and school level. We've had some data denial going on for a while. That was a few years ago, where we were like, we don't trust what's in the system right now. We're not seeing things. Then we went into being a little bit indifferent about the data. We didn't, we were like, we didn't trust it, so are we really using it? Some people were, some people weren't. Then we got into a little bit data curious, because as we started to clean up our data practices, we were like going, I wanna see what's out there. And as the Wisconsin State Assessment System started to change, we were like going, we need to pay attention to this a little bit more. We then moved to data informed. Sometimes we're data fickle. In other words, we're providing data to support decisions we've already made, rather than using the data to help support the decisions. And where we want to be right now is we really want to be data driven. And actually, this past Monday, I turned that around and I gave the charge to our principals, our building leaders, saying, we don't even want to be data driven. We want to have decision driven data. Well, we're already planning ahead and knowing we're using this data ahead of time to help not drive the decision, but we already know the decision points we need to make, and that data is going to help inform it. So turning that around from decision-driven, or I get this all mixed up, data-driven decision-making to decision-driven data. So when we look at the strategic plan measures and our scorecard, remember that our first 3 levels are where we're going to stay at, and we're going to talk about as the community and the board level. And then as we get down into the 4, 5, 6, parents, students, and staff are getting down into that dashboard data. And I'm going to share a little bit of 4, 5, and 6 with you today, just to show you some of the progress we've made over the past few weeks. So level 2 data is where you guys did the scorecard last year. And so each of the priority areas, remember, you ranked and prioritized. What do we want to look at as from a dashboard lens. And so we've been working on this past year. How do we do that, and how do we do it in a way that we can be constantly and communicating that with a frequency? And so we're almost there with the data warehouse now in place. We can start now planning out how can we get that to you with a better frequency, and how can we be communicating that out to the community. And then level 3 data, remember, is getting into that detailed cohort. Our community and you as board members and parents already have access to some of this, and that's through WISE- Public Portal. And if you go on the DPI website, certified data that's used for our accountability purposes, the school report cards, etc., are out there, and we can get into those detailed measures right on WISE- Public Portal. But also the district has a secure area to go into WISE- where we can dig even deeper, because, for example, we have the forward exam data for the spring, from this past spring, 2017. We were actually analyzing it today. Kim Brown, myself, and our curriculum coordinators were at a data retreat, data dig, and we were looking at our WISE- secure, because forward exam, ACT, etc., is still embargoed, and as soon as I can release that and share that with you and the public, we will. But we are already using that data to help plan forward for professional development, school improvement planning, processes, etc. Which then we're now going down into levels 4, 5, and 6 after taking that high level look. Remember, level 4 is our school-wide data, level 5 is grade level classroom data, and level 6 is individual student data. And all of these things that I'm about to show you or talk about have fallen under action steps that are under G1E, which is develop multiple methods to evaluate that student data. So today, we were out in WISE- and we were under summative certified data. And what we're going to talk about is that summative certified data means at that point in time, that snapshot, we can go out and no matter who looks at it, you are going to get the same numbers because it's the same group of kids every single time. And our accountability measures are based on those certified data. When I go into our new data warehouse or data dashboard, EduClimber, those numbers are never going to match with the certified data system. And the reason being is we now have a data warehouse and a tool to analyze that allows us to talk about the kids that are in front of us right now. And so the percent that were proficient in advanced in 3rd grade is not going to be the same as out in the certified, because that might not be the exact same students that are sitting in front of you as a classroom teacher in that moment in time. Okay, so it's really talking about real-time data so that we can make formative decisions. So.
And by real time, we're talking within 24 hours. So 24 hours after a piece of data is entered by our staff, or we receive the data from an outside source, and it goes into Infinite Campus, 24 hours later, the teachers who use this system will have access to it.
So on the scorecard that you guys put together and you prioritized last year, one of the first priority areas, actually it had a 0 here, is we wanted to know what are the demographics of our student population. At the end of the school year last year, our certified data had us at an enrollment of 9,915 students. The breakdown as far as race and ethnicity, our student groups were certified at 15.1%, 39.2% economically disadvantaged, and English language learners are at 4.5%. If I went into Infinite Campus on the last day of school, this is like a little bit of quiz, true or false, those numbers would match exactly with the students that were sitting in our seats in our schools at that day. Nope, it would be false, because we know students move in and out. A child's family could change their economic status during that time. We could have students that have been exited from the English language learner program. We could add a student newly identified as a student with disability. So this happens to be certified data. We're working all the time. When we give you different numbers, we're working with what those numbers are currently. But what has that meant for student data, that level 6, that individual student data, and for the classroom teacher? It's been hard. We've had the data at our fingertips, but it's been hard to analyze. So, for example, the first priority area and the first scorecard metric that you guys have asked for is how many 3rd graders are proficient readers. Well, a lot of times we would spend hours putting together the spreadsheets, and the teachers would enter we had the data, it just took us a whole lot of time. And we would have to wait for the the state assessment results to come back. We don't have to do that anymore. So we log into EduClimber, and I've already set this up to be on secret mode. So in other words, anything that I go on, there's no student names are going to come up in here. So I don't know if secret mode's the right thing to call it, but you know what I'm saying. There's
Yeah.
no
Private,
student
yeah.
data information is going to be compromised. How about that? So we're going to go in here, and we're going to answer that question: how many third graders are proficient readers? Okay. And so when you come into EduClimber, you're going to see up here, like, it looks like it's blank, because this is designed to really be a real-time data system. So as soon as the first day of school starts, guess what? All of this is going to start to populate, because this is what's currently happening in school. So EduClimber looks at what we set up that I want to monitor on this dashboard real-time when it comes to student data once school starts, and it can also go historical. So right now, because we don't have third graders in school right now, that means we're going to go back and look historical, right? Which means back to June 7th. So we're going to go on in, and the question was, are third graders proficient readers? So we're going to go to grade, and because we don't have any kids registered in school yet, I'm going to go to all schools. I'm going to go to grade. We said third grade. The category that we want to know for reading, we're going to end up in what category? Literacy. Right? Then we have the list of all the assessments that we give within our district. And when I say all this, not every child is getting one of those. Like, for example, third graders aren't getting the ACT, right? So, but what we're going to look at is, because right now in the data warehouse, we do have the forward exam data so that our teachers can use it on day one of school, right, when they can come back in here. I'm not going to put that up because it's embargoed, right? So I'm going to go to our DRA reading assessment, and so that is given to students in the fall and in the spring. And for students that are weren't on track or were struggling and we want to continue to monitor them, we give that assessment in the winter time as well. Okay, so we're going to go into the DRA, and we are going to look at this particular school year, 16-17. I'm going to make sure that when I do this, I can look at individual schools, or I can look at all the schools together. So right now, we're going to look at all third graders in all 14 of our elementary buildings. So I'm going to combine the schools, and then I'm going to hit search. And then up pops up, here's our data. And it took all of what? Yeah, a few moments. And there was no spreadsheets involved, nobody had to enter anything, etc. So the DRA goes by level, and it goes by score. So a child, once they are given we know which levels they should be at a particular grade, and then a score is information that tells the educator, that tells the teacher that at that particular level, how well is their comprehension and where are they within that level, because a level can be so wide. We want to know where are they in that level. So the score helps the teacher, it doesn't help you guys, but if we look at this right here at the end of third grade, 75% of our third graders were proficient and were reading at grade level according to this assessment. And so then when I go to the data wall, let's hope top secret mode works. I checked it.
Keep your eyes shut for a minute.
Yeah.
And it's building the data wall.
Should have a little music here.
A little music here. And the reason it's building the data wall and it's taking this, because what did I click on? I clicked on every single third grader in the Oshkosh Area School District, which is like 700 kids.
Plus.
And here's our data wall. And so this goes out to, here's all the students, and once again, they're masked, so you can't see that. But it gives for the student, so for their level, this was their fall level, their winter level for this particular student, because right now they're a red color because that means they're in need of support right now.
But you can see
And then here's
growth.
their spring. And then here is their score level. Here's their score level as they go in that. And so you can scroll through that and we can see all the kids that are blue, that means they met the grade level benchmark at the end of the year. And students that are missing a score here, they should be missing a score there because they were on track, they were blue, they were on track in the fall. And so the teacher didn't see a need at that time to reassess them. And so that would go there. Or if the score is missing here, maybe that child was absent or the score wasn't entered.
Or they could have possibly unenrolled. and re-enrolled.
Correct.
Day.
But so in how many minutes did we just pull together all of that data? This is a game changer for us. And it's a game changer because once again, we're using data that we were already collecting so that we can stop spending all of the time collecting the data, and then now we can be really spending the time to actually use the data. And so that would be an example that I can show you right now, because like it's super cool. It was super exciting to be able to I know they're all laughing at me, but it's super cool to be able to actually look at the data and going, I can see how we're going to use this and how it can really push things. So let's talk about how that's going to go. And I'm going to get out of here.
While Julie's doing that, I just reflect back about 4 plus years ago, and I still recall one of our best data minor, Brenna, sitting here lamenting the fact that she could not, how hard she had worked on creating the database for trade.
No, I don't want to. I want to log back into.
Well, I remember
I closed this. I closed the show slideshow.
Right, yes. It was not able to be matched or comparable from school to school.
Okay, so as I'm logging back in, Dave, do you have anything to say?
Yeah.
Can you juggle?
Or do you,
I
do you, or
can,
do you have a
but-
couple questions while I'm logging back in?
I would imagine that as, like I'm thinking about parent-teacher conferences already.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
They're
Just
the
show
one
me
thing
my
we,
kid.
right,
Yeah.
and there's a amazing capability of pulling up an individual student
Student.
and seeing all the different components that
Yeah.
come along for the
Correct.
ride. The other advantage is remember, this is all tied together. This would not work without Infinite Campus. Infinite Campus
Right.
wouldn't work with, so all of the steps that we've taken over the past several years to clean up our data systems and all the great work, of our building secretaries, making sure that information's in there, our parents who are doing online registration and changing their information in the system, all of that allows this to work out much, much better. And the data warehouse has been in place for years, ever since we went to Infinite Campus. That's the data warehouse. The data dashboarding and
There you go.
reporting tool is what we needed to find, something that was
Yep.
simple, easy enough, could plug into our data sources and give us the information, and most importantly, be something that a teacher would actually find easy enough to log into, look at the information, because we want our teachers and we want our principals to be going to that next level of asking the right questions. I don't want them focusing on, can I get this data or not? I want them focusing on, I wonder if.
Mhm. Which is a great lead into the next pieces of this. And so Kim and I have been leading this part. Oh, you were going to ask a question?
No, I was going to,
Yep.
talk about the teacher's role.
Yeah, yep. So with
I
this.
stalled long enough?
You stalled long
Okay,
enough,
good.
thank you. So what we've been working with, and we just rolled out with our principals, we started this past March and we revisit this on Monday, is that once again, the student data inquiry leads to practices inquiry. The student data piece of it, it's not going to take us a lot of time to go dig through the data because we have a tool in place that's gonna save us that time. And so we have multiple methods to evaluate that student data now. And so we can inquire about a child's learning. But now the hard part, and the part that's really going to be the game changer, now that we have this in place here, is the inquiry about our work as the adults. So that student data, how do we get it to move based on our work as adults and starting to go in that? So we spent a lot of time today, Kim and I and the curriculum coordinators, talking about, we have the student data pieces, so what does this mean for our professional development? How are we going to be working with schools to guide them through that inquiry about the work that the adults are doing with children every single day? And what does that mean? So,
I have a question.
Mhm.
How are the teachers responding to the dashboard?
well, EduClimber and the data dashboard was just approved just in June. You guys had a written report about that. We did all of the setup in July. We just trained the principals.
Okay.
Our instructional support teachers and other teacher leaders are going to be trained along with our school psychologists and our counselors. And then we're going to be doing a slow roll out to teachers.
Okay.
We want the need to be there, and because if you're not a data person and you just plop this tool in front of somebody, that's really overwhelming. Me, I would be excited, but that doesn't mean we really need to build the need and make sure that we understand how to use all these pieces, because with a powerful tool comes great responsibility.
Yep. Yeah.
On how you do it. So it's going to get to the teachers' hands, because the teachers within EduClimber have you could see the tabs going across the top, and they have a My Class tab. And so when the teacher logs in, they see their students in front of them and all the data that comes just for that. They don't have to sift through anything.
Yeah.
Everything for the children that are in front of them at that moment is there within the system.
Nice.
And they don't have to do that, where we've been filtering through all these things in the past. So it's really saying, how do we roll this out, and how do we work with our educators to really leverage that tool?
The other big advantage is the other systems that are in existence are often, they do many of the same things, but when a new student is added to your class, go enter the student in, go hand mess with all of this, as opposed to this system is tied right in. So when a student moves, if a student moved from one of our elementary schools to another,
They're in there.
within 24 hours, everything moves over, the teacher sees that student in their list, everything just works.
Nice.
The district hired, excuse me, an assessment coordinator, I believe, for the first time in 2003, and that job was filled by Phil Eichstead. He was here 5 years.
Yep.
He was a strong advocate for adding these kinds of resources and tools for teachers in order to better inform their instruction and to do a better job of individualizing learning. So I bring that up because sometimes things change quickly, and sometimes we have to be extraordinarily patient for things to come along. So again, kudos to Phil Eichstead, who had the vision of doing this as early as 2003. We're finally in 2017, and for the last 14 years, we've had teachers and administrators who have led the charge on data mining and interpretation of data and trying to improve our instruction for each child without the benefit of these tools. So I think this will be a great resource. These will be great resources for our staff, and excellent tools to communicate better with parents. So thanks to everyone who contributed.
And I think Allison's question of how do teachers feel about it, it is important for those who, for all, but there will be a level of anxiety, because the visibility of performance will be very graphic. And that's an issue that frankly is all a part of what our responsibility is to have all must perform. And that's an issue that will create angst, and Julie spoke to that with principals on Monday about the issue of having to have some heart-to-heart conferences about what's happening in individual classrooms, and that's part of the responsibility we all have relating to having that. Again, with great power comes great responsibility, and in this case, the great responsibility is, now that we know more, what do we do about it?
Right, and I want to piggyback off that, Stan, that I talked with the principals about going from a flashlight to a floodlight. And when we have that much visibility with things, the responsibility for us is to provide support for our teachers, because our teachers do great work every day. But now that we know more, we can not necessarily do more, but do better and put our focus and our hard work in one direction, and maybe not as scattered. Like, we can be more focused about what we're doing, and we're leveraging those things. But it's about support. It's not about coming in and saying you're doing a bad job. It's now that we know what's going on. When Jim talked about with Bray Architects about you can't see the plumbing because it's underneath all that cement. Well, sometimes we weren't seeing what student performance was looking like because it was just buried in all the data. Now we can, but now that we know, we have to do something about it, and it starts with support for our teachers. It starts with professional development and the coaching, and making sure they have what they need in order to do that, supporting our staff.
And it has to be, tailored to, so that we're not spinning wheels with individuals who don't necessarily, who are already having success, but to tailor it to the individuals who need this. That is our responsibility to provide the necessary skills to accomplish that.
And none of our teachers are doing this alone. We're doing this as a team. There's lots of, that's the one thing this district does very, very, very well, is we have supports in place for the teachers as they go through this process. Also, it's important to understand that this is just another step in cleaning up our information. We're going to find some things that just don't look right. And in some cases, they aren't right because maybe we didn't enter that information properly, or maybe we need to change how we do that. That happened also when we went to Infinite Campus, and we've even seen it here in the first few days that we've rolled this out. So the advantage of that is the data is going to become more reliable.
Yeah.
There's more eyes on it. There's more people pulling the rope in the same direction, and that's going to lead to better results.
Another piece of this, and I didn't show you this because once again it's not a school day, but the EduClimber supports PBIS, and so all of the data pieces that come behind PBIS and the behavior is all supported. And so reports that we were trying to pull, and our PBIS leadership team and our different groups that we're struggling with, how do we pull this together and make it viewable and easy to read, etc. EduClimber has done that. We already have the charts, graphs. We already did some analysis of data from this past spring, this summer, to help inform action steps that we're putting in place in fall. And then that one in particular was at Oshkosh North. Nice. So, I mean, it's already working and up and running. So that's the other piece behind this. It's not only academic, it's also behavioral. Okay. And so we're looking at, once again, you're looking at the whole child. You're looking at your whole entire school, whether it be behavioral interventions or academic.
Well, I remember the EduClimber being presented at the Education Committee, and to see it work again, I think you certainly recommended a fine system, and I think it's amazing what it can do. Just a couple clicks and
Yep, and there it is. So once again, now we have to do the hard work.
Yeah.
Right.
The fascinating piece will be once we have school in operation, we have daily measures available to us as we see progress along time, as opposed to only having several probes in a year, and then in the past history of waiting for the state to get us test data too alone, when we only had those few handful of probes, and we sat there with bated breath every year waiting for that progress.
Any other questions?
Oh, I did have a question, if I could go back for just a second. Where are we with the hiring or recommending for hire the communications director?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. So we had final interviews this last week, Monday, and we are doing reference checks this week, and we hope to bring someone forward to you very soon. So
We're hoping for the second meeting of this month to have a recommended appointment.
Very good.
So we're excited. We had 3 outstanding interviews on Monday, late afternoon and early evening, and feeling good that we have kind of a 1, 2, 3 order if suddenly one didn't work out. But we're very comfortable with what we have. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, well, thank you so much. This is great. Thanks. All right, moving on to consent resolution agenda. For the consent agenda, the board has been furnished with background material on each item or discussed it at a previous meeting. These will be acted upon with one vote without discussion. If a board member wants to discuss any item, it will be pulled out of the consent agenda and will be voted on separately. I've been asked to pull 1B and 2. Would anybody else like to pull anything?
There's only one left.
Does anybody want to pull 1A? All right. So, the board will consider approval of 1A, personnel, resolution, appointments, temporary appointment, resignations, and salary schedule.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Eliason?
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Evans?
Aye.
Evans, aye. Garner?
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog?
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Olmsted?
Aye.
Olmsted, aye. Peschel?
Aye.
Peschel, aye. Carlin?
Aye.
Carlin, aye. Motion carried.
Okay, Resolution 1B, be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education approve the retirements as filed with the Secretary to the Board of Education.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion.
Mrs. Garner, I had asked to pull this. We have two current employees who will be transitioning from employment with the district into retirement, and I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank them for their service to the children and the community members of our Oshkosh Area School District. William Fretchel is retiring as an assistant custodian fireperson 2 at Webster Stanley Middle. He's been employed with the school district since 2011. And Jody Peschel is currently or has been a building teacher assistant at Carl Traeger Elementary School since 1995. And I think it's appropriate to wish them well as they move on into hopefully happy and healthy retirement.
Okay, any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Evans?
Aye.
Evans, aye. Garner?
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog?
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Olmsted?
Aye.
Olmsted, aye. Peschel?
Aye.
Peschel, aye. Carlin?
Aye.
Carlin, aye. Eliason?
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Motion carries.
Okay, resolution number 2, be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education approve the 2017-18 commercial property lease agreement between Most Blessed Sacrament Parish and the Oshkosh Area School District as filed with the Secretary to the Board of Education.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion.
Mrs. Garner, I had asked to pull this one. I have been a member of Most Blessed Sacrament Parish and its predecessor, St. Peter. Well, I was a member of St. Mary's Church and now I'm a member of St. Peter's. And so in order to be totally transparent, I think it best that I vote present on this. I was not involved with the contract in any way. And while it perhaps would impact me indirectly because they might ask me to donate more money. But it wouldn't be the full amount of this contract. I think morally and ethically I need to vote present on this. Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion. I had one question that was brought up by email because it was over the amount that we will send out for bids.
That is incorrect. It's not over the amount.
Okay.
The total amount of the lease is $14,300. I also did clarify that we are not charged at all the month of July.
Okay.
And we are only charged half months in both June and August.
Okay, so just
So
under
it's
the radar. We're
Yeah.
copacetic.
I also should note that the county has been kind enough, Bill Topol and his staff, they have given me, last year, they wrote us a check for $20,000, which completely covers our rent, our internet, our copier lease. That is reoccurring the commitment for 5 years because they're so pleased with the outcome, so that must be noted also, so I respect that. I also looked long and hard for that location with realtors, with the chamber. That was the only place in the whole city that was willing to rent us that type of a space. So in terms of bidding it out, that was a little confusing to me because how do we get competitors if there's no other
Nobody
place
else.
that's willing to rent? So that's,
Interesting.
it's a blurred line for me, so I would welcome more discussion about that policy.
Okay.
And I should just add that this effort, this program, and this activity is actually a revenue generator for the school district, with outside neighboring districts contributing to. And the counter to that is that we are also not paying tuition out. And I think we should note the fact that the first time, and I think Teresa verified in all of Teresa's years of working with the school district, that this is the first time that we are not paying others to educate our children. In all of those years, we are doing
job,
it
Linda.
all internally. And that's to Linda's credit, and we approached a philosophy that I so strongly believed in, that a district of this size should be self-viable, and that you don't contract out services, that you can deliver yourself. And Linda took that on with great gusto and driven to make that work. And the other part that it needs to be noted is that relationship with other agencies in the community, including the county, is because of that outstanding working relationship Linda has developed with those who mutually serve our students.
Thanks. Yes, thank you, Linda, for everything that you do for this district. Any other discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Garner?
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog?
Aye. Oh, excuse me, present. I was moving on to adjournment. I'm sorry. Present.
Olmsted?
Aye.
Olmsted, aye. Peschel?
Aye.
Peschel, aye. Carlin?
Aye.
Carlin, aye. Eliason?
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Evans?
Aye.
Evans, aye. Motion carried.
Okay, request for future agenda items? Yes?
I would like to see the at-risk report that was submitted to us in written form come forward as a workshop item. I think that's a very significant report, and I think it should be shared more publicly because we have students who need a different kind of education, and I think it's important for the board and the public to understand the various ways that we attempt to reach all of our students. And so I would request that come forward as a workshop item.
We will not have it for the second meeting of the month, but we'll have it, we can
That's
certainly
fine.
have it produced for the first meeting of
Great,
September.
thank you.
Mhm.
Any other requests for future agenda items? All right, announcements. Yes?
I just have one. As a member of this board, I also serve on the CISA 6 Board of Control as your representative and that of larger districts. We just had a meeting last evening, and this was the strategic plan update from the director of CISA 6, Ted Knightsky. He calls this plan on a page. So this page summarizes the mission, vision, values of CISA 6. It spells out the goals of their strategic plan, the strategies to get there, and how they will know that they've made a difference, which Julie addressed tonight quite well in terms of those data. So Mr. Knightsky is available to work with other districts. He's working with a number of districts in CISA 6 to develop this kind of executive summary strategic plan. So I just wanted to share that with you since we were talking about strategic plans tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Okay, seeing none, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Herzog?
Yes.
Herzog, aye. Olmsted?
Aye.
Olmsted, aye. Peschel?
Aye.
Peschel, aye. Carlin?
Aye.
Carlin, aye. Eliason?
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Evans?
Aye.
Evans, aye. Garner?
Aye.
Garner, aye. Motion carried.
Oh, this meeting's adjourned. It's been a while.